Hey, everyone, and welcome to the Purpose Matrix. You are going to love today's guest, Kris Benson. We talked about so many impactful things. I mean, I don't even know where to start. He talked about just reverse engineering your life, a lot of how life is all about freedom and what those freedoms or lack of freedoms are for you. We talked about the power of your network, Kris's approach to reading and books, which I think is really important to understand. Kris's superpower of just the ability to jump in what he's learned from that process, how he defines success. We talk about some metrics on the percentage of time we spend working and how many people are unhappy with their work, which is really profound. And then what Kris and his partners are doing with their company and the amount of time they spent upfront of defining who they want to be as a company, the impact they want to have, and why just businesses in general are vehicles for good. So much value out of this one. They're building a culture manifesto in their company. So much to take away, whether you're a real estate investor, business owner, entrepreneur, or striving to be any of those. You're going to get a lot of value out of this. Check it out. Hello and welcome to the Purpose Matrix. I'm really excited for this week's guest, Kris Benson. Kris, how are you doing today?
I'm doing fantastic, Phil. How are you, sir?
I am doing great. Thanks so much for coming on. Kris and I have known each other for a couple of years, and he's doing some really exciting things right now. I actually have like 3 bullet points of notes from our pre-call, so we're going to get into some really fun stuff today. But before we do, so Kris, partner and responsible for investor relations at Blueline Ventures, a private equity firm that's doing great things and has a great mission and just story behind it, which we're going to get into. But before we do, so Kris resides in Atlanta, his wife Jen, and they have 2 boys. And just a great guy. I've gotten to know him, and he's doing, as I said, doing some really exciting things now. But before we get into that, Kris, tell me a little bit about your backstory, kind of how this all evolved and came about. How do you arrive at Blueline?
Yeah, happy to. How far back you want to go, Phil? Childhood or?
give me the most interesting version of Kris you can give. Whatever feels feel compelled to share.
I grew up upstate New York, middle class. My mom and dad are great. I kind of an idyllic childhood. For a while, if I could go back to high school, I probably would have. We had a great time in high school. Our hockey team was really good. Thought we were kind of hot, but as you get older, you realize you're a very, very small fish in a very, very big pond. So went to school, met my wife, Jen, in school. I guess fast forwarding through a lot, actually had our first child when I was a senior in college. So had to grow up super duper fast. Noah, who is my 23-year-old now, was an interesting ad when you're a senior in college. And so when I graduated school, it was, how do I make the most money to pay for diapers, formula, and rent? So got into sales. I interviewed basically anyone who would listen to me. And sales felt like the opportunity to make the most dollars out of school. So worked for a B2B payroll company called ADP. Probably you're familiar with them. One of the monsters.
I am.
They're a great B2B training process. If you want to go and get your teeth kicked in 5 days a week and get a lot of no's, that helps to go try to sell payroll services. So did that for a while. Got into medical devices. Again, Phil, not a lot of intention about what I was doing. It was always just, how do I make more money? Had a couple of medical device roles. My last real W-2 job was a company called Intuitive Surgical. They make the Da Vinci robot, and I was super grateful to be a part of them. Incredible technology. Still to this day, an incredible company. Stock price, an incredible ride. And really, Phil, that's where I sort of had a little bit of realization around what I wanted my life to look like. I was working a ton, traveling 3 to 5 days a week, missing a lot of kids stuff. And in my 30s, I was like, I don't want to do this for another 30 years. And like many real estate investors, I read Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and I was like, oh, passive income. That is a way better way to make money. So we got into real estate, started with kind of small stuff in our town, duplexes, quads, and hated it. We had 22 units, I think, and it was a nightmare, as you know, everybody kind of goes through this path.
Yep.
So, you know,
good stuff.
Yeah, go ahead.
I want to talk a little about you said just this is when there wasn't a lot of intention. And then you said, you started to think about what I wanted my life to look like. How did you think about that at the time? And how did you bring that to work? Like, how did that impact your career? Like, what were you trying to get out of your work for your broader life? How did that go about?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, Phil, because of our situation, it felt like the first 10 plus years out of college were survival. right? I mean, we had kids right away, right? So it was a lot of overhead added to the pile very quickly.
Yep.
And it was like, all right, how do we pay for a house and food and do fun things with our kids? And so in my head, it was always, how do I make more money? Like that was, and the only way I knew at that point was W-2 jobs, right? So I was always looking at, all right, if I do this job and do it well, what's the next level I can get to? And really intuitive, and this isn't, I'm not trying to be arrogant in any way, but in the world that I lived in, intuitive was sort of the top of the tier, right? I mean, there were years where guys were making 7 figures, and like it was, a really profitable W-2 job. But what I saw, Phil, was the idea of just trading time for money. There was no end. Like every January, I started at 0. So it was just sort of the first realization. And I'll tell you something that really always used to stick with me. It would be like a Thursday night and I'd be in some godforsaken airport, like, I don't know, Detroit or Minneapolis, or no offense to Detroitians.
Yeah.
So
weather that we have in Ohio, places like that. I hear you, Chris.
Yeah.
Chris is from Atlanta, I said earlier, so he has much warmer weather than we do.
I'm from upstate New York, so I know all about what happens from November to
you got
March.
The heck out of Dodge.
Yeah.
You got the heck out of Dodge.
But I used to see that guy in a suit who was 65 still carrying a bag around through the airport, and I was like, nope. Like I'm not going to do that. And so I think it was starting to educate myself on what other models looked like. And honestly, Rich Dad, Poor Dad was the first one where I was like, oh, there's another way to do this. Yeah. And you can create passive income.
Yeah. And we'll get into what you do now, because it's not real estate. It's business and private equity. So it's not all about real estate here. But I think what's so important to recognize for our listeners is that, like, pay attention to where you're going by looking at where, if you're on a path, pay attention to the path you're on, who is where you want to be and how are they living their life. And that doesn't mean you can't go that path and not have a fulfilling life. I'm not saying that, right? But just pay attention to that and see where you think you're going professionally, what your life's going to look like professionally, and how is that the life you want to live, and is it in alignment with what your personal life wants to look like too, which I think is so important, because you mentioned it too, but you were hustling in all of your 20s, but you missed a lot of different sporting events and other things with your kids with your boys when they were younger. So let's, again, just paying attention to just being very observant and very curious, which you talked about a little bit on the pre-show too. You're just a curious guy, which I love it, a growth mindset. Let's fast forward a little bit too. So you're in the W-2 world.
One more thing I think to mention there that I think is helpful, which is reverse engineer your life, right? When you find that person that you really like, you look at their lives and you're like, wow, how did they do that? And I think most of us kind of come to this thing, and what it is freedom, right? The freedom to do what you want to do with whom you want to do it. And that's really the goal I think everybody ultimately ends up with. And then, I have a 23-year-old son, right? So what I'm trying to impart on him is just think about, like, hey, 10 years from now, Noah, what do you want this to look like? And let's find some things along the way that help you get there. And I think so many people kind of go through life with it's just another day. It's another day. Well, 5-year you and 10-year you are going to happen. God willing. Yeah. So put some plans in place that get you somewhere in 10 years. Like, hey, what do I want to be? How do I want to look? And there's different seasons of life too. When your kids are young, it's hard. As they start to get older, you have a little bit more free time to think about these things. So that's all I would say is I'm super grateful how my life has turned out and the path I've been on, but I wish the intentionality around, like, oh, I want it to look like this. And here would be my last point, and I'll shut up. But I think you have to see it to be it. So, like, you need to be around people who are doing other things that you can be like, oh. And Phil, we know each other through a mastermind group called GoBundance. That's what GoBundance has done for me, right? Is just open my eyes to people have built their lives a different way. Yeah. And I love that. And if you can do it, Phil, I can do it, right? Like if I see you doing it, it's like, oh, I can do that.
Yeah, yeah. There is so much power in getting around people that are doing it. And, first of all, I think when you go in rooms like that, the first reaction a lot of times is imposter syndrome. You're like, oh man, do I even belong in this room? But then as you get to know people better, look, everybody else in the room is this thing called a human being, and they're doing things, but they all have faults. They all have issues. They all have challenges. And you start to see that, oh, this person's not perfect and he figured it out. Or, this person's not perfect in this area and he figured it out. And everyone has different strengths and weaknesses. And I think, so to kind of tie this all together, be aware of the associations that you have. Pay attention to them. Do you want to be like those people personally and professionally? And if you don't, find associations or groups that you do want to be around and you want to be like those people. It is extremely, one of the 5 pillars of success we talk about is the association. And it's so powerful in many ways, not just see it to believe it, but also just the power of accountability you get from those different groups and the associations you're around. So I love that. And the other thing you talked about is freedom. And I'm curious what you think, but we hear a lot about financial freedom and time freedom. But I think freedom, like at one point I was trying to figure out what are the freedoms that people don't have that they're pursuing? What are all those? And there's a couple that, like ego, what do people think of me, and getting away from that. And I think the ultimate freedom is honestly freedom of purpose, to really pursue what you feel your heart calls you to do. But what's holding you back from that is different for everybody. I don't think there's a designated set of freedoms. It might be money. Like it was probably money for a lot of people early, but then there's other things that are holding us all back still from just really pursuing what we're called to pursue, in my opinion. So what do you think? How do you think about, I guess, like what are all the different layers or levels of freedom? How do you think about that?
That's a good question too. I think you're spot on with most people start with financial freedom, right? Like if you are not financially free, it limits a lot of the other choices that you make, right? And financially free can mean anything. To me, it just means basically you have income that you produce an income regardless of if you're working that exceeds your expenses, whether that your expenses are $100 a month or $1 million a month. So being rich to me, if you make $200 in income and it costs you $100 to live, you're financially free. Like, yep. I'm good. So I think that's the piece that sort of opens the doors to other things for a lot of people. But Phil, as I'm 45 right now. When I turned 40, it was like a halfway moment, right? It was like, all right, rough and tough. If I'm lucky, I'll live to 80 and be in good health. And so what do I want to do with the back half of my life? And to me, I thought about it as, well, I want to be able to choose who I'm doing what with. And, like that's the big thing, is meaningful work, meaningful relationships to me is the part that matters. And hopefully I create some wealth along the way. But the freedom to basically do awesome stuff with awesome people was the thing for me. It was, I just want to have that filter. And if I'm not doing those things, I got to go in a different path, and I may not be able to turn it around overnight. But, the intentionality is, let's fix that so that I am doing awesome stuff with awesome people. So,
and one of those, I love that. And I think freedom of relationships and what you do, again, this can be personally and professionally, all areas of life, whether that's travel, adventure, health, professionally. So I'm going to talk about professionally because you are doing that. And we got it, like you're giving me chills in some of the stuff you're doing and talking about with Blueline. So I want to fast forward to Blueline, and I want to talk about the approach you took to forming the partnership and the culture you want to build. I want to talk a little bit about that more because it's really profound. So why don't you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So my background previous to Blueline was in private equity real estate. We built a rather large self-storage platform. I was a piece of the puzzle. And it was a great experience, learned a ton. I resigned at the end of 23, and really it was my partner and I were just headed in different directions, right? We wanted different things. And I think, Phil, in my life, I've been pretty good about saying when it doesn't work the way I want, to be like, all right, that's okay. Like, I'm going to move on and I'll find something else. And I had no plan to what we were going to do. We have a mutual friend, Joe Wexler, who created this entity called Blueline Ventures. And what they were doing is buying small businesses. And so when I resigned from Reliant, he called me and was like, hey, you got to come take a look at this. And I was like, all right, so we did, and spent a bunch of time together. And it's a fascinating space. And I'm happy to get into the business part of this, of buying operating businesses and trying to help them grow. But more importantly, the lens that I left Reliant with was, I'm just going to do awesome stuff with awesome people. That's it. So fortunately, I had the financial freedom to do that. And so we spent a lot of time. It started out as 3 guys. So it's Joe, his partner, Bo McMahon, and Mike Bernhardt, and me. So I was the 4th guy. And so I just spent a lot of time with them first. Phil, I think it's really important to, if you're talking about a partnership, to understand who the people really are. And in my opinion, the best way to do that is go stay at their house. So I spent a couple of weekends living with their families, and then you figure out who they are. It's really hard to be fake around your kids.
Yeah. Yes.
Sleeping in someone's guest room and you're up there for breakfast in the morning. You get a pretty good sense of the people and who they are and what they do. So, yeah, I just hung around. And so the biggest piece for Blueline Ventures was, who do we want to be? And somewhere along the way, there's a 5th guy named P.E.A.C.E, who is a really successful private equity-backed GI doc. They rolled up a ton of docs. And he was kind of out in the world looking to buy his own medical practices. And we said, hey, P.E.A.C.E, we're going to do this together. Come with us. And so before we did anything, the 5 of us sat in a room for 3 days and basically built what we call a culture manifesto. But essentially, it's the guidelines of how we want to show up and what we want Blueline to be for all of our stakeholders. For us, the portfolio company employees, our investors, the vendors we work with. And it was really us taking the time to clearly define what those things were. And the theme of the whole thing was, we just all want to do awesome stuff with awesome people. And Phil, you talked about it as we were starting, is there's a big difference between organizational health and business health. And what we want to focus on is the people and the organizational health piece first. How do we build successful cultures in our own entity and the companies we're buying? Because when people think you care about them, and they believe they're a part of something, they're going to run through walls for you. Yeah. And I think we too often fall into the metrics we all talk about all the time, right? Revenue and expenses and EBITDA and, discounted cash flow rates and net cash flow, all that stuff, that all matters, but there's people behind all of that. And so if you can build a culture where they care about what they're doing every day, the other stuff's going to take care of itself. So we built a culture manifesto. I'm happy to give it to you so you can link it in the show notes, but it's been a really good guiding light for us to say, how does this match with who we want to be?
Yeah, I love it. And so I just did a solo episode where I talked about the importance of, as a person and in business, defining who you are, who you want to be. And like you've said a couple times, awesome, just do awesome things with awesome people. Did you guys how did you approach that? Was that a core values what are our core values, or what was the technique you used to help define, or was it just write it out, obviously live with them, which is pretty intense, Kris, if I must say, but I love it. It's great because you are truly if someone really wants to get to know me, it's not always good. When it's chaos with 5 kids, you're really going to get to know me. And unfortunately it's definitely not always positive. So,
but
how did you
find
use
out
core
who
values
are,
or
Phil? That's how you find out who people really are, right? We just interviewed a COO. The last interview was with his wife. We flew to Toledo, Ohio to meet his wife because it's gonna matter.
Yeah.
And we're gonna pay this guy $250,000 plus a year to $500,000 a year to run one of our companies, and you don't think I'm gonna meet your spouse?
Right.
Of course, so I just think people brush off the humanistic side of what we have.
Yeah.
But back to your question, where awesome stuff with awesome people came from. It just hit me in the shower. I wish I had a better story, Phil. When I left Reliant, and in my head, what it started is awesome shit with awesome people, but we toned it down so that we could make it more corporate.
We're a clean show, Kris. Keep it clean.
Sorry. You can beep that. Whoever's editing.
You're good. You're good. Nope. I'm not going to edit it.
So when I came to Blueline with Joe and trying to figure out, hey, is this something I'm interested in? That's the lens I came with. And I said, look, I want to do awesome stuff with awesome people. That's going to be the lens I look at everything. And so everybody just kind of bought into, we do too. It was a good way of saying something I think that we had all felt, but maybe had not put words to.
Yeah, I love that. And the other thing that you said, and I'm going to reverse engineer what you said a little bit, but you said organizational health feeds business health. And in organizational health feeds financial health and financial results. And that is very, very true. However, I've talked about this. Financial health does not automatically equal organizational health. So just because you're financially healthy and you're having a good year and you're profitable does not mean your organization is healthy for the long term. So do not confuse, do not get too caught up and tied up into your results. It's so important as a business and as a person to get clear on who you are and why you are who you are. Focus on that. And then because like that's who you are is not your results. Who you are is just who you are, what you do. So I think defining it and getting clear on that is so important. And then the other thing, when you put people first, and John Maxwell talks about a lot. I love John, but people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So you can sit here all day long and you can talk about tactics and strategies and all those things. And if people don't think you care about them at all, you can talk about that stuff and they're not going to go get it done, right? They're not going to be bought into it. So I think just understanding, for business leaders or for somebody that's wanting to start a business or just, maybe you're hustling, maybe you're starting real estate, maybe you want to buy a company and get it going, which we can talk about that more too here with Kris. But no matter what, just putting people first over the results, I think you're going to win with that no matter what. And even if it's financially not successful, that's just the right thing to do.
Phil, think about these two things. This blew my mind. Rough and tough, 30% of your waking hours as a human being, if you live to 80 years old, are spent at work. Rough and tough. 80% of people believe that their companies don't care about them and are dissatisfied with their job. So that means 80% of the humans on this planet are spending 30% of their lives miserable. And
that's terrifying.
For me, that's insane, right? Is it going to make you a better dad when you get home? No, you're going to be miserable, right? Like business is a vehicle for good, and we've all lost track of that idea. If your people are fired up to be at work every day, they're going to be better moms and dads. They're going to be better coaches at school, better spouses to whoever their significant other are. And for us, I think that's our responsibility of Blueline. Yes, we have to make money. Totally understand. But if people are pumped to be at your place of business, it's going to work. And I'm going to give you just an example just because it just happened yesterday. So our first acquisition at Blueline Ventures is a gas station sign reimaging company. So all they do is gas station signs in Cincinnati, Ohio, and the surrounding area, Kentucky, Indiana. It's a fascinating business that we didn't even know existed. No one knows it exists.
Right.
But there are two guys there. One guy's been there 26 years. The other guy's been there 8 years. The 26-year guy has worked there since high school. He was best friends with the seller's son, has stuck it out. He's our VP of field operations. He knows everything. And Mitchell is our office team lead. Well, neither of these guys have ever had any sort of development in their lives, or corporate development. Like you and I have probably gone through some things. I worked at a bunch of big corporations, so I saw stuff. They didn't. Right. We sent them to an EOS Great Bosses workshop yesterday in Cleveland. So we have an EOS implementer. His name's Gene Roberts. He's a stud. And we sent them to a Great Bosses workshop. So I talked to them last night when they left. So this is, 8 or 9 hours of outside the business, working on the business, not in it. And Phil,
speaking my language.
It was like we had taken blinders off their eyes. Right? Like they were like, Kris, 10 out of 10. I didn't understand that we could do these things. And they're like, when it's said out loud, it's very logical, but I've been doing it this way for 10 years. So, back to your piece, when do people care? Like we spent money, took them out of the field for 2 days to go do this because we care about, hey, yes, we want the business to grow, but we want you guys to develop as leaders too. So I think those are the things where I know today they're super fired up to be back at work. They're going to implement some of the things that they talked about, and ultimately that'll turn into better business outcomes for us.
And they have the knowledge that, as you said, business, like they're learning from you guys, like, hey, we have this business because it's a vehicle for good, and we're gonna have an impact on you as human beings, as business leaders, and then it's going to carry over in your personal life, and you're going to have an impact on the other employees in the organization too. This is going to be a ripple effect for the whole organization. And I love like for business leaders especially, or anyone that hasn't been exposed to training or their team hasn't been exposed to training. I think of like the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. When you read it, it's completely different financial advice than you've ever heard before, but it just clicks. It just makes sense. And what you just talked about is they've never had exposure to like to EOS or business or leadership training. But when they see it, like, of course, this makes so much sense, but people don't know what they don't know. So give them grace, but at the same time, get this stuff in front of them, because businesses can be such vehicles for good. The other thing I just want to rant on a little bit is 80% of our listeners perhaps are dissatisfied. And you're going to spend 30% of your life doing doing what you're doing. And this is like, I'm a little bit bold with saying take risks. And maybe I've said it, and maybe people have, lost money because of it. Who knows what has happened? But at the same time, like, you can't go to 60, 65 and you can't not find out. You got to go find out. You got to go try. If you love what you do, go all in and use your business or your career as a force for good. But if you don't, and you're like, oh, I got 20 years left, I can grind it out, or I got 30 years left, that can't be the answer. You gotta go after it. You get one life, you gotta go live it. So rant over, short, but I love this stuff.
You assume you have 20 years left. You're the same age as me. Tomorrow we could be struck down with, knock on wood, some terrible disease, and that's it. That's our time.
Right.
Like, people have this thing in their head. It's like, well, I'll be fine because I have tomorrow. Maybe you have tomorrow. Right. None of us are guaranteed any of this.
And and then the other thing I ran on a little bit, but is think about the example you're setting for the people around you, your peers, your friends, your kids. Sure. If they see you and you're complaining about your job or you're frustrated all the time, like, you got to be an example to your kids. Ultimately, they're going to have to figure it out. And Kris, you're a little bit more advanced in years than I am. You're like version 4.5. I'm only 4.2.5. But anyway, you look better than me. You have way more hair. So if you're watching on YouTube, you can see Kris does not look 45. But it's just so important. Like, we all have to figure this out, but we got to go after it, in my opinion. So I'll stop there. I want to talk more about, if you don't have anything to add to that, the element, like, what are the key elements of this culture manifesto? Because I just to add on, Kris and the partners spent a ton of time together, defining what they want this business to look like. Why are they doing it? He won't say this, but this group of guys they don't need this financially. They're doing this because it's a vehicle for good. Like, they will profit from it, but they wanted to make sure, like, we are really aligned with what we want to do here. So they spent hours and hours and hours building out what this partnership looks like, and then this culture manifesto. And I think I just want to express, I want you to talk about that process a little bit more and the main elements of it, because I think so many businesses have not done the most important work. And so many business leaders have not said, this is the vision for the business. This is who we are and what our culture is going to be. We get pulled into the business. It's so easy to get pulled in. We don't step back and do it. So tell me more about the manifesto and like the major elements of it.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think it's just, think of it as like a compass of why we exist and what we're trying to do. We had like 5 guiding questions that we put in the culture manifesto that sort of informed the rest of it, which was, why do we exist? How do we behave? How will we succeed? What do we have to do right now? And who must do what? And I think, Phil, if you plug that into any of your businesses or what you do, that's going to answer an awful lot of questions. And, those were the things that we dug into. And those are questions from, have you read any of Patrick Lencioni's stuff?
What are some of his books? I don't think so.
I knew that was going to be a follow-up. I don't remember. But those are his 5 guiding questions. So we were like, all right, well, if those are the 5 guiding questions for the business, let's figure out what we think about those. And so we just went through step by step, right? And, like, how do we behave? We went through a bunch of things that we think define us. So integrity and candor. We want to be naturally curious. We want to make data-driven decisions. These are not rocket science things, but it's just putting it down on paper and aligning on it so that it's a lens at which you look at all of your questions through, right? Like, does this align? And when we're buying portfolio companies, Phil, like this is part of the story, right?
Yeah.
This is part of here's who we are. This is what we're going to bring to you. And then at the portfolio company level, they're bringing their own, we're building a culture manifesto with them of here's who, that company I talked about, it's called C&B Signs. C&B Signs in January put together their own culture manifesto. It's tacked up all over the office now, right? It's how we're, from an EOS standpoint, it's how our hiring, firing, and promoting is based on the pillars in their culture manifesto. So I think it's not rocket science-y stuff, but it's just good things that people don't talk about prior to getting things evolved. Usually what happens is an idea, they get a business together, and then the business starts gaining momentum, and then they find out they have these conflicts further down the road.
Yeah. And I just want to put this in perspective for people. You have 5 partners, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
or 4.
These folks have been extremely successful. They don't have to do this. They've gone through different W-2 careers and corporate and tons of training. They've gone through their own business, own partnerships. Like they've ran the course. They have a lot of experience. How many hours and how many pages are these different documents?
Yeah. So the culture manifesto is probably 5 pages. Again, I'll send you the PDF. We had it done with a graphic designer, so it looks pretty. We'll put it on our website, hand it out to investors. We did a second exercise, Phil, that we haven't talked about yet, called the partnership charter. This was recommended to us from another mutual friend, Bob Castellini. And there's a book called The Partnership Charter. It's from this group that does partnership, basically mitigation. So guys who work with partners that are falling apart. They have a consulting firm. They go in and do arbitration, try to help the groups come together, come with some settlement before they go to legal. So they wrote this book about all of the conflicts that partnerships have. And then they built this thing called a partnership charter, where as part of their consulting firm, they'll sit down with you and ostensibly walk you through every piece of partnership issues that they've seen in their history. And so we, as a group, all 5 of us did probably 40 hours of homework. And then we came together over 2 days and put that all together into a document. Now it's expensive. I mean, we probably spent, 25, 30 grand on it. But again, it's cheaper than blowing up the partnership 5 years from now when there's some actual money attached to it.
Right. And that has a lot of who you are in it too. So, and the other thing I want to hit on there is with that, the recent acquisition, just there's so many good elements of this. With that acquisition, not just having the manifesto, but then the charter, but just the vision that you're portraying, not to your employees, but then as you're buying real estate, businesses, whatever it is, you can share this vision with an owner and say, do you want this to be the company that is looking out for your employees or not? So it also becomes a strategic advantage where people are just, once you put it out there, people will run towards your vision. The other thing that you said that I love so much is you talked about the core values and everything you're doing and the manifesto. You have that at the parent level, but the employees are very engaged as there's an acquisition and building that for what, right? Because you might be buy a company in Cincinnati, Ohio, and then let's say Texas or California or wherever, and maybe you have a buy box. But my point is there's going to be different people at different places. That's their culture that they own. And if they're part of the process, so this is a little bit of the corporate training and strategy deployment, you need your organizations to build a plan and be a part of that process. You can't just dictate it to them. Cast the vision at a high level and let them build it, because then they're going to execute it well. So you're doing so many things right. The EOS model is great. What you've done with the manifesto and the charter, you guys have done so well. So congratulations for all of it.
Well, I mean, we're still too early to congratulate us too much, but we're having fun doing it. And by the way, Lencioni's book, I Googled it while we were talking. 5 Dysfunctions of the Team is the one that everybody knows. The one about organizational health, though, is called The Advantage. I'd highly recommend that as a very interesting read. And again, it's one of those things that is very obvious when you read it, but nobody puts any focus on it. And it's surprising.
All right.
So I'm going to hit on one thing just in our world, I think that really matters. So the businesses that we're trying to buy are EBITDA, which for people who may not know what that means, it's earnings before interest, taxes, depreciation, amortization, basically another way of showing profit, but $1 to $3 million. So these are not super small companies, but they're not big companies. I would guess most of them probably 10 to 50 employees. Very profitable. And the interesting part about it is most of those people have never had any sort of exposure to the larger corporate development stuff that we're talking about.
Yeah.
And so our opportunity to bring that to them, which for us is sort of commonsensical, but for people who've never seen it is very eye-opening, I think is the key component to it. We've had a lot of fun doing that, and just being able to sit down and say, hey, what do you want out of this? And no one's ever asked them, right? Like we just did quarterly reviews and we're like, what do you want to do in our company? And they're like, I don't know. I've never thought about it.
Yeah.
And we want to support whatever it is that you want to be here.
Right.
Like here's what we think is a good option. What do you think?
We get to define who we want to be, right? I mean, it's bizarre, but honestly, your mission, what you guys are doing, I didn't realize how closely aligned, but it is so closely aligned because I have kind of two themes I've been, harping on recently, which is first of all, we need good people we need good people and good companies to be great. Like we want, if there's good people, if you're buying good companies or just companies that have good people, we want those companies to be super successful. We just want them to blow up because if you bring this stuff to more and more people and these businesses grow, there's a huge, profound compounding impact of this. So I love that. And what really resonates with me is now that I'm in the small business world and I came from the corporate world, I see the gap. There's this massive gap between these. By the way, there's plenty of negatives or challenges with the corporate world and bureaucracy and the red tape and all kinds of things, right? But at the same time, there's a lot of good things that are being done. And if you're in that environment, so much. That's the other thing. Corporate people that are in the corporate world, you are so well trained that if you're thinking about small business, you can be really, really successful at it, in my opinion, because you have a leg up on so many other people that don't have the exposure to financial training, business training, leadership training, strategy deployment, whatever it might be. So you're hitting a chord with me, Kris. I love it.
Cool. Well, I guess my job is done here, Phil.
Not yet. I want to ask you some closing questions. This is really good. And then I want to ask you more about Blueline and how people can learn about Blueline, because I think what you guys are doing is great. And I also said, by the way, you said, well, it's not done yet. No, you're defining who you are and you're doing the right organizational work. So you can sleep well knowing you're doing the right work, regardless of the financial results. Now, you guys, because of that, will get the financial results. I know that, but you can sleep well knowing that you're doing the right thing for the right reasons. So, how do you define success? How do you define success?
I've heard Tim Ferriss ask that question so many times. It feels like I should be better prepared for it. For me, and this is just me personally, is the no regrets thing really matters to me. So success can be tied to a whole bunch of different metrics, but on my dying day, whenever that is, hopefully I got a run ahead of me. The hope is that I don't have regrets around what I did and how I treated people. We talk about it in the Culture Manifesto, but there's a great book called Integrity by a guy by the name of Dr. Henry Cloud. And he talks about your life is like a boat going through the water. And what you do is leaving a wake behind you, right? As the boat goes through the water, you got a wake behind it. And how does that wake interact with everybody else in your lives? And so success to me is everybody who's came into contact with my wake felt like it made them better, or it was a good experience. And that can be on the business side, family, friends, et cetera. But, I hope that when people look back and say, what was Kris's wake? It was a positive. And if I can end my life with that, then that's probably been a successful life from my standpoint.
I love it, man. That's awesome. I love the analogy. By the way, coming from a wake, you're making some big wake with that wake boat. I know you're a wake surfer, Kris. So you got a big wake. So, and I think you honestly, it's actually a pretty interesting analogy because I think you're leaving a big wake too. So keep it up. If you step back and reflect in what you've done, past careers, what you're doing now, step back and reflect. How does what you do? How does it make you feel?
The first word that comes to mind is proud. I think what I'm most proud of, Phil, is the ability that I've had to jump. Like, I left a job that I was making a boatload of money at to go jump into real estate full time, right? And almost everyone was like, what are you doing? There were some guys who are probably more entrepreneurial, but I think part of my advantage has been I've been willing to make jumps and take those risks you've talked about before I knew what the outcome was going to be. And as I've gotten older and done it more times, it's less scary, right? Because I just realized like, oh, you'll figure it out. And you talked about it earlier, right? Like, I think when we are young, we have these visions of successful people where they're like magical in some way. And Phil, my first job I told you was selling payroll. So I met a whole bunch of business owners. And in my head, all of these guys and gals must have been really, really smart to be a business owner. And I still remember I met a guy, he was a roofer, was very successful, sold him payroll in his living room, beautiful house. And what I left his house thinking was, you're in charge of this thing? Like, you're the guy that's running this? So I think all of us sort of have this thing, and you mentioned imposter syndrome. It's probably built around that. And I know I've struggled with that too, of like, oh, Phil did it, but I can't do that. And it's like, no, you can. Like, no one has any magical formula. There are people who are smarter than us. There's no question, but almost everybody can do almost everything. And I think my success to date has been predicated on the ability to just say, well, I don't really know how that's going to work out, but I'm pretty sure I'm on the right track. I'll figure it out. And to date, it's worked pretty well. Talk to me in 3 years. We'll see where Blueline is, but I'm optimistic.
I think it'll be great. And I think I love that, the ability to jump. So if there's like a resource, book, podcast, any like one thing you would say, man, this had a really big impact on me and I just want to share it, what would that be?
Phil, I think of my life in like seasons, right? And there was a season of how do I figure out how to go from trading time for money to passive income. Rich Dad, Poor Dad, right? I hate to harp on that because everybody's heard that, but man, that was a life changer for me. The season of real estate to M&A acquisitions, there's a great book called Buy Then Build. Walker Diebel is sort of the Robert Kiyosaki of the acquisition world. He was like the first guy to build a brand around this thing called entrepreneurship through acquisition. It's a great eye opener. Cody Sanchez just wrote a book, Next Door Millionaire. We all got that book for GoBundance. It's a great one too. She's a little bit more markety, but good book. Those are the ones that have been the big mindset shifts for me of like, oh, that's better. I'm going to go do that. The other thing that I would say just on a whole is, man, the best thing that I've done for myself is two investments. One, mastermind, surrounding myself with other people who are doing really incredible things. You are the 5 people you spend the most time with, right? You show me your friends and I'll show you who you are. That has been, the ROI on that has been 100 times over. And the other thing is I buy a lot of books. I read a lot. So like the books you have behind you, right? Atomic Habits, Traction. I can't see what the other one is.
I mean, 4 Disciplines of Execution. So I just did a podcast on strategy deployment. So like I was pulling out some of those, and those are like, the whole message was you can apply strategy deployment concepts and systems and processes to personal life and business life. But by the way, if you see a book that might be interesting, Kris mentioned 4 of them, just buy every one of them, guys. They're $20. Like that book might change your life, and you might read 10 pages and put it down. Who cares? They're $20.
That's the thing, Phil, right? Is it opens your perspective to something else. And when you read it, like you said, it just clicks. You're just like, oh, when you feel that, and after you've felt it a few times, you can now, that's your gut telling you like, hey, this is pattern recognition. You've seen this before. Go follow this path. Yep. For me, those have been the 2 biggest investments. Like, if I could encourage anybody, like, read a ton about all different things and go invest in the people that you're surrounding yourself with. And ultimately, if you find that right tribe or group of people, it's going to be life-changing for you. And Phil, just to kind of bring that all back to where we are with Blueline, 4 of the 5 guys in Blueline Ventures are from GoBundance, that mastermind group that I'm a part of. Like, that's how we came together. We knew each other for years, and that's the connection. So hopefully we'll be the greatest story of GoBundance history. We'll see.
But honestly, everyone has a history of success. So just, you think about these people that are surrounding themselves with so many people, and then the time they spent on the culture and the partnership agreement, all the stuff that you guys have done. We, like, as business leaders, we really need to prioritize this work on the business, the culture, leadership, all those things as much, not just in the business. And the other thing I'll say is, like, as I'm writing out the Purpose Matrix, the book, like the acronym I have, you hit on every one of them. So, like, get clear on the why. So the acronym is purpose, education, association, courage, and example. Get clear on what you want. Educate yourself. Kris said, read as much as you can.
What's that acronym spell?
The acronym is PEACE. And if you go through that, and in every area of life, you'll get peace. But if you do those 5 things, you talked about purpose, you talked about education, association, courage, the ability to jump, you talked about that big time, right? And then leadership and example, you talked about that a ton. And I think if you do those things, you're going to find success. Over time, you're going to find success. You're going to get clarity. You might not have success right away. It might not work out the first time, but you're going to learn, you're going to grow from it, and you're going to find the next thing that brings you in the right direction. And then, do that in the different areas of life too. So, Kris, this has been amazing. Obviously, Blueline is doing the right things, and just building a healthy organization. How can people find out more about you, Blueline, and what you guys are doing?
Yeah, website's probably the easiest. Blueline-ventures.com is the website. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn. It's Kris with a K, K-R-I-S. You can email me too, kbenson@blueline-ventures.com. All those things are good ways to reach out. Happy to help however we can. And it's been an interesting journey.
And Kris, there's opportunities to learn from what you're doing, and also investment opportunities as well. Is that correct?
Yeah. So we launched our first fund at the end of last year. So the acquisitions that we're doing are part of BLV Fund 1. So second deal is closing this month. Third deal hopefully will close by the end of the summer. So yeah, just getting off the ground. But if you're an accredited investor and interested in participating in something like that, happy to provide more info on that too.
Awesome, Kris. We'll put that in the show notes. Hey, Kris, this has been absolutely amazing. I appreciate it so much. I've been talking about this just recently, all these topics. So I loved every bit of this episode. It was so enjoyable for me. So thanks so much for coming on. Purpose Matrix signing off.